And we're live. All right. Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com. I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. AC, we were just talking before we hit record here we like hearing the challenge stories. And so I had Moise Navone on of Mobileye. Mobileye basically helps fuel autonomous vehicles. They were acquired by Intel for $13.2 billion. But the real journey, as you know, was a lot of downs, not just ups. And he had to go back to his family at one point and he had to take a pay cut and say, listen, kids, I'm pulling you out of all extracurriculars. We can no longer eat out. I just got, I have to take a pay cut because we need to keep this sustainable, and that's the reality of anyone who's been through this journey. That happens. Okay. So check that episode out and many more. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25, which I co-founded with my business partner, John Corcoran. And we help B2B businesses connect their dream clients and give to them their best relationships by running their podcast. We will launch and run your podcast so it actually serves your best relationships, and you can profile your the companies you believe in and the people and the other CEOs that you want to profile and their thought leadership. So check out rise25.com. If you go to the about page on inspiredinsider.com, you can see the actually motivation behind this is more than just business. AC, it's like my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor and his legacy lives on and his story lives on because there was an interview done by the Holocaust Foundation with him. So you can check that out on my about page, but check out rise25.com if you have questions about podcasting. We've been doing it for over 10 years. So I am excited to introduce today's guest. And literally, I do this all the time, AC. I was trying to order a water system for my new office. And I said, I do not answer calls from numbers I don't recognize. So can you please text me before you call me? So I was actually wanting the text because that just made for a better experience for me because I know I'm not going to answer the phone, if I don't recognize the number. So AC Evans I have here, who's a pioneer in conversational marketing and the co-founder and CEO of Drips.com. Drips is a conversational texting company leading the way for some of the biggest brands in the world. They use automated, humanized, talk about humanized conversations at scale of companies like Liberty Mutual, CreditRepair.com, many more. On a daily basis, Drips engages in millions of completely humanized conversations with zero client-side human resources or operators. AC, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
There's so many places to start, and I do want to talk about, from the startup phase to the scale-up phase, the culture and scaling and hiring. But I kind of want to start with the roots of your story, because I was talking to another entrepreneur the other day, and they were worried about their kids, and maybe one of their child isn't amazing at school, and they're like, I'm not sure how we navigate these waters. And talk about your journey a little bit from college.
Yeah, even in high school, I was a poor student. I was a D- student. Almost failed a couple times. Had to go to summer school to make up. I wasn't attracted to the curriculum or the way it was presented. And luckily at the time I was in a wrestling school, meaning a school that had a decent wrestling team. And I was on that team, and the wrestling coach suggested that I looked into a vocational school. So this was a school where it was more hands-on. You would go there your junior and senior year and do hands-on training. There was mechanics, cooks, a lot of cosmetology, a lot of different trade skills. And the one course that I joined was digital design, I was a great artist. I used to draw a lot. That's where I spent most of my time during class doing was drawing, which, doesn't necessarily align with the curriculum and math and English and whatnot. But I joined the vocational school. I dug into digital design, and I quickly became one of the, top students there. I had perfect attendance.
What was it? At the traditional, was it a motivation thing? Was it like a learning thing? What do you think it was?
I think it was an interest thing, and I have the same problem today. If I'm not interested in something, I give it very little thought. It's I have to try to find things that I'm interested in learning about, interested in doing or knowing more about. If I pick up a book and I go through 20 pages and it's not like speaking to me, I rarely nowadays I'll just put the book down, but before it was very difficult for me to push myself through that material. And the same was true in school. So I think it was just, maybe it was stylistic of the way they taught. Like that was definitely more hands-on, meaning I was doing design, I was doing coding. We weren't just talking about it or, doing, instead of doing history and science, I was able to do automation and digital design and graphics and things that were just more interesting to me, candidly. But out of that, I got early placement at the Browns Stadium. I was the youngest person working in the production area of the Browns. So I was the one that was designing all the 3D animation and the helmets flashing. And I did the same job at the Cavs Stadium.
So where do they show that? Is that like where they like break for commercial and you see those helmets kind of going boom?
Yeah, it was actually
awesome.
on the scoreboards, which was cool because at the time the Brown Stadium was brand new. This was in 99, I think, in 2000. And the stadium was brand new, state-of-the-art equipment. I had been sent to DC to do in Rochester to do training on Daktronics scoreboards, which were again like top of the line, new stuff. But yeah, it was the boom boom clap, boom boom clap, all that kind of animation.
We need to find that. How do we find that to put on the beginning of this intro?
Oh man,
of the podcast.
That would be amazing. It would probably be embarrassing the way it looks nowadays. Who knows what they got now? But long story short, I got let go of that job. I was great at the stuff that I was interested in. Again, just to show my pattern and progression through what eventually landed me in entrepreneurialism. But I was great at the design, great at the creative work. But one of my jobs on game day was to be there in case something went wrong, right? In case I had to queue something up. But most of my job was in pre-production. Right. But the one thing that the director had me do, and it was probably because I was just the youngest person, I had nothing else to do during the game except watch the game, was I had to record the game. So I had to take this giant beta VHS looking, recording device. And I would have to put it in, hit record, and then at halftime, pop it out, put the next one in, hit record, file it, and give it back to them. And that was the only thing I had to do on game day. And I went a handful of games. I can't remember how many, 6 or 7 games that season, doing it. No problem. But then one game I got caught up doing a design. I wasn't even watching the game. I'm not a big sports fan, but I was caught up doing this cool design with this helmet spinning around. And I forgot to record the second half of the game. And I go up to the director. His name was Dan. I said, "Hey, Dan, I forgot to record the second half, man." And he looked at me and said, what do you mean you forgot? And I said, well, I was busy working on the design. It's really cool. I can show you. He's like, hold on. You can't forget to record the game. Keep in mind, this is 2000, right? This is before DVR and TiVo and all this stuff. Right. So there's literally a hole in the NFL archives somewhere because of, young 18-year-old.
What would they use for that? What do they use it for?
It was for the archives. It was literally literally for the record.
Like AC, you've ruined history of football network.
There's a hole in the Browns archives that has my name on it. And the director, he said, look, like, you're a good kid, you do great work, but you can't forget to record the game, the end, And he said, if it happens again, you're fired, or otherwise I'm going to get fired. No problem, sir. Won't happen again. 3 weeks later, it happened again. Fired me on the spot. And I've had a string of jobs that went something like that, where if I'm interested in it, I'm digging in, I'm pushing for it. But the second it loses my interest, I just don't give it as much focus as it should.
And you said, you dropped out of college.
Again, same. I was interested and enjoyed the marketing class, the psychology class, but my parents made enough money at the time that I couldn't get government aid, and I didn't make enough money to pay for my own college. So I had to work during the day, and then I was doing night school, which sucked. As an 18-year-old, you're there with people way older than you. Yeah. The courses aren't as interesting. The teachers aren't as, you're not in a big auditorium.
Socially, it's not like people your own age that you can socialize with.
Yeah. So it was very hard. And I candidly, I went to college just because I thought that was what you were supposed to do, so I went to Akron U. I'm a big fan of Akron, and it was close. And candidly, they were one of the only places that would take me. And long story short, a couple semesters in, I had to drop out, but I was making six figures online doing my own thing at the time. So I felt good about the dropout. Paid off the little bit of money I owed them, and really just never looked back. I never again worked for another company. I never again prescribed to any higher education. I even up to that point, I barely ever read a book cover to cover that wasn't required reading. Now I've read, hundreds of books, and I dig in and self-educate myself on a lot of different things. But again, it's the curriculum of my choosing, which I think was always the piece that I was missing in high school and college.
Real quick, AC, what are some of your favorite books? What are some business or leadership books we should be checking out? I think I have like 3 credits on my Audible account that need to be used. So
you might, I don't know if you've read Man's Search for Meaning, but this
one
is
of my favorite books, Viktor Frankl.
Okay,
totally.
I assumed with your grandfather's experience, that would be an interesting one. I just came up with a short list for books I'd recommend during this pandemic. That was one, just because I think everybody should learn to appreciate that your mindset is something that you control, no matter what your surroundings are. And if he could make it through that with somewhat of a positive attitude, how could we not make it out of this?
Right, exactly.
The Obstacle is the Way is a book I enjoy. It's a Ryan Holiday book.
Holiday,
So another one that I think is appropriate for this pandemic. I personally have found immense growth in my impact, my relationships, my family throughout this pandemic. The One Thing, I think, is a good book. This is all about.
I've had the author on, the co-author, Jay Pappison on.
Yeah, that's great. I also enjoy books like Tim Ferriss's, Tools for Titans and Tribe of Mentors. Like, to me, those are great because you can pick them up, flip through 2 pages, get some good content. That I thought was probably the best author book hack I've ever seen. He literally just took his podcast and transcribed it and made a best-selling book. It's like, wow, that's super smart. But yeah, those would probably be the 3 that are most top of mind for me right now. If people are looking for I have a book club in my company now that I run.
What's right now? What's
the One Thing is right now.
Oh, the One Thing is okay.
Yep. So we're gonna do a review.
I'll give a shout out. I'll tag. Shout out to Jeff and Jay. At the One Thing, and Jeff runs the One Thing podcast. So Jeff, if you want to have AC on the podcast, I'll tag you in this.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to pick his brain on a couple different points in the book. And then another book that I love for entry level readers or people that just want to read more that don't read because it seems like it's a daunting task to crush through a book is How to Fight a Hydra. I can't remember the author's name, but it's a very small parable or metaphor on problem solving. And it's a story, it's a fictional story about a guy that decides to go on this quest to find and fight a Hydra. And,
what's a Hydra?
A Hydra is the dragon with the multiple heads.
And, got it.
And when you chop the head off, 2 more heads grow out. But it's a metaphor for problem solving, and it's a super fun read. You can read it in 35 minutes or so.
We were talking about also helping people win at work. Gary Ridge.
Great.
What did you like about that one?
I like just the structure it gave. I read that book when the company Drips, I think, was maybe 12 employees, something like that. And we were getting to the point where we knew we had to give people more than a thumbs up or a thumbs down as far as quantitative feedback. And that book, I think, gives a very, very strong structure. We've since adopted different toolings and technologies and methodologies. We performance is 50% performance and 50% culture alignment, which I think is important for a scaling company to really button up their culture. And if you have any books on that would be something I'd be interested in. I haven't read. I've had a lot of good entrepreneurs and founders help me learn a lot about culture and establishing core values and measuring and defending it. But I haven't read any. I haven't found any great books on it yet. Yeah,
there's actually, it's funny because so I had a guest on and David Long. He does basically that's what they specialize in, which is kind of employee retention and culture. And he talked about, they have programs for like Walmarts of the world and like large companies, but He talked about his company's My Employees. And he talks about Build to Lead, and he talks about one of the key elements he recommends is doing a book club with the company, which you're doing. So shout out to David. But yeah, he's done some amazing things, and they help large companies, small all across the gamut with their kind of principles of that. I want to talk about culture, because culture is important to you. And we will talk about some specific use cases for drips.com. Also, so if you are listening, you're like, I have a couple questions in here that I noted. Creative and copy is key, and that's one of the elements early on that I know AC focused in on. But just talk about culture for a second, and going from a little bit from the startup to scale up, and what do you do with culture to maintain that for the company?
I think the biggest thing early on, I mean really early, I had a CEO coach, a local gentleman by the name of Blake Squires, multiple exit entrepreneur, real popular guy in Northeast Ohio. He's done a lot for the community. And I took him on as a CEO coach when, we were going from, call it 4 to 14 employees, something like that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he focused me in on was mission statement, vision statement, and core values. Mm-hmm. And the core values at the time, I remember it was great, because me and my co-founder, Anthony Greco, our CTO, he heads up technology for Drips. We were defining the very DNA of what he and I, represented, like what we thought our key differentiators are our true nature. And I literally mean ours, as in Tony and mine. And those are lean, happy, team, passion, and improve. And we had a whiteboard. The part of the practice was writing down everything we thought was critical, right? Being analytic, drive, all these different things you can imagine. And we whittled 48 things that we thought were, kind of important to us, down to these key 5. And these 5 drive everything. And, the interesting thing is, like, you can start with that. And the core values are very, very much a DNA of the founders. But eventually they have to be the DNA of the company. And the piece that I think that we learned not too long after, or maybe a year or so after, was how I define happiness may be different than the way you may define happiness, right? So it became this, this word that like somebody might define lean as something different than what I define it as, or improve as something different than what I define it as, or passion. Different people think different things. So what we did eventually, and this was a couple years ago, I believe, Katie, who runs HR and culture now, she's just done a great job at really taking it on and giving it a real life. She's also on that leadership page. She built out definitions of these different core values. And so we had 3 or 4 or 5 different kind of loose definitions, lean to save cycles and prove things via minimum viable products, come with data, don't make gut decisions, make informed decisions, things like this. And then we came up with examples. This is a level that it's funny. We hire a lot of people now, and when they ask about culture, I say, well, do you have 2 hours for me to lecture you? And then when I show them this spreadsheet, with this huge multi-page document that is true, tangible, actual examples of what does it look like when somebody is exemplifying these core values, and what does it look like when they transgress. Another one of my favorite books is The 48 Laws of Power. I don't know if you've ever read that, but it's just interesting, rules.
Is that by Robert Greene or Robert?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay.
It's a super, super cynical book. You have to, in my opinion, you have to read it with a grain of salt, because it's a lot about like kings and queens and, how to survive the court and all these things. But still a lot of it's applicable today. And one of the things I thought they did great was they would have their rules, right? The 48 laws of power, and examples and cool stories about those rules. But then they would have transgressions. And that's something that we added in that I've actually never seen another company do. So we actually have, 70 different examples of what does it look like to exemplify these different core values. and then another 50 or 60 examples of what does it look like to transgress against those values. So what we do now is every time we do a big hiring wave, so like I just did this 2 weeks ago where I did a Zoom with, I think, 7 or 8 new hires, and I talked through these and I showed the example and I said, hey guys, like print this PDF out and circle all the ones that you are a transgressor of, and be proud of that, because one of our core values is improve. So you need to know what it is that you can improve on. I specifically designed with Tony some of these examples and definitions to keep ourselves in check. We put some transgressions like, man, I really know that I got to be better at this. I'm going to write that as a transgression so that I can keep myself honest with it. So in my office at our HQ, which we're obviously not at right now, I have these things printed up on my wall, and you can see I got 6 or 7 of them circled that I know I'm bad at and that I want to be better at. So yeah.
What do you think you need improvement in now? What are you working on now?
There's so much. The one of the biggest for me, and this candidly, this pandemic's been a great lesson for me is impact. Focus on the one thing, right? If I'm gonna give more shout out to the book, but focusing on impact, focusing on leveling up my problem solving. At the office, the buzz of the office, and it's great. We have a full-time chef, we have a production kitchen, we have these huge, massive lunches and breakfasts together as a team. And the buzz of the office is intoxicating. My office doesn't even have a door on it. It says like the janitor's closet. And I'm always running around. I'm always bouncing around. I'm always helping out and adding input and asking people what they're working on. And it's great, but I've actually equated it to like, as far as impact goes, I was kind of like a lion eating field mice. I was just kind of jumping around, solving very, very, very small problems, which A, shouldn't be my focus, and B, I'm also taking the ability away for somebody to solve that problem themselves, or to learn how to solve that problem. So that's been something that I'm trying to challenge myself with, is instead of giving answers, asking more questions. Letting people come to the answers themselves instead of just answering it. It's been hard. It's only been a few years, and Tony and I have built this thing up to almost 90 employees now. And in the beginning, it was like, look, if you got the answer, like we don't need to debate it, just run with it. We were building and trying not to run out of money and or time. So there was no time for teaching. There was no time for inception, if you will. But now we're absolutely at the point where Tony, myself, and all the other executive leadership, like we have to slow down, let other people make the mistakes candidly, and learn. So
because you put the people in place now, it frees your time up to do more things, which you want to be focused on more impactful things.
Yeah. It's just again, because I was at the office and there's all these great people and teammates and people I really enjoy working with and helping. I just know that I spent a significant amount of my time just doing that, just helping very, very random things, which is great. It's not that that's bad time spent, but what it meant was I wasn't spending my time working on bigger problems. I call it like hiding in the weeds, right? Because if I'm hiding in the weeds and I'm solving these very, very minute issues, I'm not leveling up my thinking or my focus as a leader to risk solving the big problems. Because when you risk solving a big problem and you miss a big project, you miss a big deal, you miss a big whatever it is, that sucks, But if I'm day to day solving these little problems, doing whack-a-mole, it feels great. You get the dopamine response. I feel like I did 72 things during that day, but at the end of the day, did it really move the business forward, or did it just help a bunch of small things out?
Yeah. One of my favorite books is Wooden by John Wooden. And that quote resonates in my brain of, does activity lead to, or equate to achievement,
Yeah. Busy is not impactful all the time.
Talk about, at what point you decided to hire an HR person?
Well, Katie, we've had since we had her, I can't remember what number employee she was, but she was very early on, 6, 7 maybe employee. And she was very much office manager. She worked as my executive assistant, and she just helped with kind of everything. poor Katie, she's had 3 jobs, for the past 5 years. And very recently, 6 months ago or so, she dumped me and decided to start focusing on completely on HR and managing the office and the staff, which is great. So I had to find myself a new support person, which is always fun. When you build a bond like that, like Katie really, and I mean this truly, she took kind of Tony and my vision for the culture and turned it into this organic, living, breathing thing. And we have a very, what I would call almost offensive, HR, not defensive. Most HR is like there to make sure the company doesn't get sued and, T's are crossed and I's are dotted. But we have a very proactive, very deliberate, HR effort that is focused around making sure that people are aligned with and the company is aligned with the core values. And if you look at all the people that we let go, or all the people that let go themselves, or self-selected out, all of them were not checking some of the core value boxes. And I mean, they really weren't. Like they actually didn't align just from their nature. And one of the things I tell people about core values and culture is that's not a bad thing. Like that, like our core values are not right or wrong. They're just how Tony and I and the company now are. It's our nature, right? It's like an animal isn't right or wrong for being how the animal is. It's just how they are. And there's many cultures out there. There's many companies that have the antithesis of our core values. I mean, like some people are all about analytics and
besides happy. Hopefully happy isn't one of the antithesis ones. We want you to be sad.
Yeah.
No, but
I would hope so, but a lot of people don't talk about that. Like I always end with happiness when I'm talking through the core values, and I tell people, I say, guys, like this is what it's all about. Like we spend more time with our coworkers, with our teammates, with our peers, with our prospects. We literally spend more time during the week with these people than we do our own families, and we do our wives, our husbands, our kids, our pets, ourselves. And if you're not happy in that environment, in that role, then you're setting yourself up for failure. To me, it's like having a bad mattress. Like you have to spend a lot of time in your mattress, every night, as a kid and as an adult. So like the sooner you can buy a nice mattress, do it. Little shout out to all the mattress companies out there.
Yeah, I like Tempur-Pedic. But talk about some of the points in the company that you felt helped with the growth. And like I mentioned one, like I think is a huge sentiment to your ability to want outside help, which is having a CEO coach. What are some other things that you did throughout this journey that helped with your journey and moving it forward?
I'll be honest. A lot of it's, it started with my partners. So Tony Greco, my co-founder and our CTO, and then Tom Martindale, who's also on the leadership page. So Tom was actually our first client. So when we built this tool, it was Tom's need. He was the only person we were doing this project for. It wasn't called Drips. It wasn't called anything. But Tom had been around in business for some time, and he brought on the first wave of clients. We quickly partnered him into the company, and he runs our strategy. And what I mean by that is there's so many things that Tony and I, just as younger entrepreneurs, haven't ran into, haven't seen. I'm a bad negotiator, right? I'm a pleaser by nature. It's just in my DNA. So Tom handles negotiations. I'm bad at seeing risk, technically or otherwise. I am a very ultra optimist. I see only abundance. That's my strength. Tony, on the other side, sees all the potholes and all the roads that we very well likely won't ever take. But he has this keen ability to hit a button and his sonar just goes out in every direction and it sees every single piece of risk. Tom, is more cynical than I am. I think.
How did you meet Tony?
Oh, I like to tell the company, and I do this at all hands once in a while, that I met Tony and he was 13 years old in an AOL chat room, which is the truth. Like we were in the old, programmer, hacker, chatter AOL spammer, whatever you want to call it, like the kids that were tinkering, like nobody really was into programming then. It wasn't even barely a thing.
Well, I read something, AC, that you coded something on MySpace that led to getting people tens of thousands of followers back in the day or something like that.
Oh,
yeah. So you have some technical abilities yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah, I coded the first version of Drips as well. Tony, I've always been the MVP guy. Back to our core value of lean. We believe very, very deeply in proof of concept, minimum viable product. That's why we've been able to bootstrap to where we're at now, is because we test very quickly, fail very fast, and we don't build something, truly build it or truly architect it until value is absolutely proven. So we actually ran Drips. Again, it had no name. It was just a script that I built for Tom back in the day, and we ran it for months before Tony built the next version, and then we ran that one for months before we hired some developers and rebuilt that version. But yeah, the MySpace thing was fun. Have you ever seen the little, you can actually pull it up if you got your computer there, customsouthparks.com. So these are the little doll maker websites where you could
customsouthparks.com.
Yeah. Or you could change, you can make a Dr. Jeremy White's South Park character, right? And give it the glasses.
I did not see that. No, I did not.
But these were hugely viral back in the day on MySpace. Everybody had their own little custom South Park.
That's fun.
And they, they give it a blue shirt and put Drips on the front of it, and give it the hair and the earphones or whatever. And I built a way at the time to go viral, because back then there was no way to share things. Nothing could go viral because of the lack of the ability to share things. Facebook was very small then. The only way that you got the kind of traffic that we got is if you got showcased on like yahoo.com or something. But we built a way so that it would say, hey, Jeremy, here's your custom South Park. If you'd like to share it with your friends, put in your MySpace email and password here. And they would. And back then there was no security. There was no CAPTCHA. Put in
your bank account here. No.
Yeah. I mean, we were, we had terms and conditions. We did it all super legitimately. But what it would do it would take your username and password, and it would log in to your MySpace through PHP curl, and it would go to all of your friends and post it on their wall. And it would post, and it would say, hey, Jane, it's Jeremy. Check out my custom South Park. You should make one too. And this thing just exploded. It just went super, super, super viral. We were getting thousands and thousands of people building and saving these little cartoons of themselves daily. And we made a lot of money off that project because we would ask the people to run through and do surveys and self-select into different offers and whatnot.
What did Tom see in that first version that was like, I need to be a part of this company. I need to do something with you guys?
He saw a 50% increase in performance overnight. So how it all started was Tom, I, and Tony had a different business. And again, this is just another one of our projects or money hacks, as I've come to call them these days as I look back. But long story short, he was using a network that we had set up so that he could run more Facebook ads. He was in the student loan consolidation business, and he had a CRM that every day it would take his database of users and send a text message to that group around noon, I believe, and it would say, "Hello, call us back at 888-555-1212 to get your student loan consolidated." And one day that system broke, and he called me up. He said, "Hey, AC, I gotta get my texter broke. I need you to fix it." I'm like, "I can't fix somebody else's software. It's their software." And he's like, "Well, they don't know what's wrong, and I gotta get this thing going, or otherwise I'm gonna have to stop buying leads, and I'm not gonna be able to do this other work with you guys." And I was incentivized to get him back up and going very quickly because we had a different revenue of income coming in. So I asked him what it did. He explained it to me. I said, "Oh, okay, well, all right, go to Twilio.com, give me your credentials." He didn't know what Twilio was. He's just putting in a credit card blindly. He's like, "Oh, okay, here's the credentials." And about 12 hours later, it was about 3 a.m. I had scripted exactly what his system did. It's something that pulled the last 7 days of leads, and it went through. The page would open up and it would send a message. Then it would refresh itself and send another message. Actually, it would send 100 messages to 100 different people. Boom, refresh, boom, refresh, boom, refresh. And I sent it to him, and it was about It was about 4 a.m. my time, East Coast. He was West Coast. And I sent him the link in the email. I said, hey, when you're ready, open this up and you'll be live again. And I send it and I go to sleep because I'd been coding for, 12, 13, 14 hours. And he calls me right away. He's like, hey, man, I opened up that link and it's not working. I got, it just says refreshing. I said, you opened the link? And he said, yeah. I was like, close it now. Why? What's wrong? I'm gonna just close it. He closes it. And I'm like, dude, you just texted like 3,000 people, at like 3 a.m. or 2 a.m., depending on where they were in the country. And sure enough, he opened up his dashboard and his phone lines were just lit up. It's like all these people were calling in to talk about their student loan consolidation. But anyway, the next
it's probably a good experiment. Like students are up at 3 a.m. anyway. So.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, he ran it the next day. And what he found was instead of his normal 10% lead to call conversion, he was seeing a 15% lead to call conversion, which is significant. I mean, same marketing spend, same leads inbound. It was a 50% increase in performance. Huge. Yeah. And he asked me what was different. And this goes back to what we talked about a little bit ago or earlier on was the message, the creative was different. Like I had woven in different marketing psychology into it. So I was using, hey, Jeremy, instead of just hello. And I would put in recency, thanks for, I'm glad you found us on Facebook or Google or wherever they came from. So now I got social proof and authority in the message. And I would say, look, I can handle 3 more calls tomorrow. Try to call me back at this time or this time. So now I had scarcity built into it and it felt humanized. It really seemed like a real person reaching out, and that got a 50% lift in performance. And that was the first step. And we quickly realized that a lot of people were texting back, but we weren't doing anything with those messages. Tony actually figured it out. He found some error log that was filling up. This thing was like about to crash our server. He said, hey, your error log is 40 gigs big. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And he said, well, every time somebody texts back, Twilio, our API handler, was sending a request to our system to say, what do you want to do with this text? But because we didn't have that handler set up, it would just log it to a 404 file, and it was just getting bigger and bigger. And we started looking at what people were saying, and wouldn't you know it, there was a lot of value there, right? It's like, well, how much does it cost? Can you call me now? I'm with my family. I can't talk. I'm driving. I'm still at school. Do I still qualify?
A million different iterations.
Oh man, a million, literally. So we built out a chat room. We staffed a handful of people to handle that, because back then there was no natural language processing. AI was more of a theory than anything, or only companies that were really working on it were like IBM and stuff. And then over the years, we just had iteration after iteration after iteration. Tony, again, very quickly came in and rebuilt everything. We staffed out a development team, and what we did was we had our humans, responding to these things contextually. That got us eventually up to a 42% transfer rate. Again, this is the same data that he was starting at a 10% transfer rate. And that's when Tom came to us and said, guys, we really got something here. And credit to him, because Tony and I didn't really think of business that way. We would get a project running, get some money going, and then we'd set up the next project and get some other money going. But Tom really had a vision for, people that he knew that could use the software, industry.
He saw the use case right away once that happened.
Yeah, he was a real businessman, and we were, solopreneurs that were, just making money on the internet. So we built the company, we gave it a name. We showed it at a trade show for the first time in 2016, January, I believe. And the rest is history. We picked up creditrepair.com at that trade show. We picked up 3 Day Blinds, debt.com, and a couple others. And now we're servicing companies like Liberty Mutual, monster companies that are coming on and using our platform.
Talk about the humanized version. And then now, how does that work?
Yeah, the humanized, the point of that is, like, everybody's seen chatbots, right? Everybody's seen web chats that say, hello, how can I help you? Right? To me, that is a poor user experience. And you say, well, I want to check on my billing account. And it goes, I think you mean billing. Reply billing if you need billing. And you're like, oh God, So the point of drips and what we call humanized conversations is we want it to look like a human. We want it to be able to pass the litmus test of you can't tell it's not a human. Even to the point where if you broke it, meaning like our model wasn't able to be sure that we knew what you meant. Like say you said like, oh, I'm on with AC on the Rise 25 show. No AI in the world is going to have a clue what that is, right? So that, in our sense, would get piped to a human, a quality assurance person that would read that. They'd read the whole conversation, the whole thread. Maybe they'd even Google Rise 25, figure out what it is, and then they would reply contextually. They'd say, "Oh, sorry, we caught you while you're busy recording. We're happy to reach out, afterwards. When do you think you'll be done?" Right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
So instead of that like error log building up, it sends it out of, you probably have so many different, versions of this, but if something spits out, it not computing, it spits it to a human to actually respond.
Yeah. And all the responses are humanized, meaning that we worked with the brands. They either wrote or approved, what do we say if somebody's driving, right? Say we're talking about telco carriers, just for a good example, like Verizon may want to have a more professional response and T-Mobile may have a more fun response. Don't text and drive, or whatever. So every brand has a voice, and we're really experts at capturing that brand voice and enabling the brand to have conversations at scale. And then keep in mind, this could be like, we're doing things for insurance carriers now where we're texting people saying things like, "Hey, Jeremy, keep an eye out. You might want to pull in your car. It looks like a hailstorm is about to hit your area." So now we're helping mitigate claims.
That's cool.
Better user experience. And again, all the while, it feels to me as the consumer like I have a real intimate relationship with the brand.
Yeah. I want to hear about messaging that works. I think every direct response marketer, copywriter who listens to you talk, it warms their heart, because the way you talk about recency, social proof, authority, and scarcity, where did you learn or study or talk to as far as the copywriting goes? Because it's a different skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, and I think I may have stole this line from Gary Vee, but the creative is the variable. A lot of times. Now, if you got the mechanics and you got the system and you got the natural language processing, like the last piece of it is the creative. And if you have bad creative, it's gonna perform poorly. If you have great creative, it's gonna perform as great as it can. The first time I learned about it was in college. Actually, one of the only classes I actually attended and got decent grades in was a psychology class. And I mean, it was just like, it just opened my eyes to so many things. A lot of this like Jedi mind trick stuff, right? The scarcity stuff, the liking, the concessions, like all these different like rules that there's just been huge studies done on. There's like, it is in our DNA, right? Like if you and I are sitting in a room and we see one cookie left on the table, we're going to feel hungry because there's only one cookie left. Right. If there's a pile of cookies, maybe we don't go after them,
Yeah. It's a social scientist like the Robert Cialdini's and the Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational and Influence, both of those.
Yeah, Influence, right?
Yeah.
That's the book I always recommend to anybody that's like looking to break into this is Influence specifically. That book is amazing. And all of it's applicable. If you're doing any sort of marketing or sales or even just, I mean, really anything, if you're trying to, date somebody, the way you present yourself on a dating website, you could use a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I think the creative is absolutely the variable.
Are there some messages that stick out? They're like, we kind of cracked this a little bit of this message works really well.
Yeah. Like anytime you can be more and more humanized, it's important. Anytime you can respond contextually, it's super important. One thing that, I mean, we find new best practices all the time through our split testing. That's part of what we do is active champion challenger split testing. One that I recall that was fairly recently was we used to, on the after hours, somebody came in to call it Liberty Mutual's funnel, and we would send one transactional after hours message, right? "Hey, Jeremy, sorry you called us after hours. Looking forward to giving you a quote. This is Bob at Liberty Mutual. We're open back up Monday, 8 to 9 o'clock," something like that, right? But what we did instead, what one of our account managers figured out was he would put in random times between 8 and 9. So we would say, hey, Jeremy, it's Liberty Mutual. Looking forward to reviewing your quote with you. I can call you back Monday, 10, 11, 1, or 3:30. What works best for you? And that got like 80% more responses inbound. And the theory is people like multiple choice. They don't like filling in the blanks.
Right.
And the fact that it looked like there's 4 spots left. Now you got the scarcity, right? You got some guilt associated there because it feels like there's somebody on the other end of the other end of the conversation that is offering these times. So there's been a give. So that's been a huge best practice for after hours. But there's many things like that, texting somebody before you're about to do the call, priming, right? Like setting
Totally. Well, that's what I was saying with the water cooler company. I actually was asking, I wanted that, right, as a consumer. That was actually a good customer experience for me.
Something that's been interesting to me, and back when we used to travel in early 2020, I used to talk a lot about this on stage at different shows. But I think it's interesting is we're similar age, right? Like you remember the time when the phone would ring and it was like a really exciting moment, right? Like I don't know if you have siblings or not, but
on the landline.
Yeah, the landline.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like me and my sister would almost hurt each other to get to the kitchen to answer the phone when the phone rang, or even more macro when somebody was at the front door, right? Somebody knocks on the door. Now somebody knocks on the door and you're like hitting the lights. You're like,
well, you have a Ring doorbell and you're looking at who it is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought a lot about it and I've unpacked it a ton. But I think the reason that we were so excited to get a phone call or to get company that came over back in the day was we were just bored to death. Like, it's just that simple. Like nowadays we got podcasts and we got phones and I got 12 missed notifications or text messages, while we've been on this thing. And I have all these other things to fill my time with. Back when I was 13 years old, I had a TV that had the thing of bonk, 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 and the bunny ears. You couldn't pause sports. There was nothing getting delivered the same day or the next day, except for like pizza. That was the only thing you could get on demand. If you needed a ride to somewhere, you had to wait for a friend to pick you up. Remember that? Now I can get a ride anywhere with a click of a button. So you have this complete shift to like, I can do anything I want, whenever I want, on demand. So if you, a marketer or an enterprise, want to call me, like good luck, right? Because I got other stuff I want to be doing. I'm browsing Netflix. I'm catching up on the game. I'm working. I'm reading a book on my phone. I have other things to fill my time with, and I think that enterprises are finally realizing that the day of stealing people's time is gone. Like, can't get people on email. They're not combing through their direct mail. They're not looking at billboards. Look around when you're driving. They're not even looking at the road, right? They're doing this.
Scary.
It's super scary. But that's why you have to enable your companies and your enterprises to have what we call asynchronous conversations, which is like,
yes,
I'll let you know I'm going to call. If you don't answer, I'm going to text you again and say, hey, Jeremy, thought we were on for 12. Let me know when a better time is. Asynchronous, it's on your time as a consumer.
What I want to talk about, who's a good fit? Who should be using drips? And then maybe how the onboarding works a little bit.
Yeah, big brands, enterprises that have volume issues. We're not set up and not focusing on the SMB or small DIY companies. That's just not how we're set up. We're managed technology. So
who should be using you, AC, right now? If they're listening, they're not using you, like, you should be using us in a modest way. Like, we've got success for other companies. Who should be using you right now that's not?
Trying to think of who to say without upsetting any of their competitors that are already using us. Really anybody in the insurance industry, home services industries, financial services. Those are really our key markets. We're starting to lean into education and travel. Like, we're having great conversations with a lot of companies that they have to look at how to do things differently now. Think of like education and how affected travel was, or or some of our best clients, like 3 Day Blinds, like we've had to work with them through this whole thing. They just, they were just bought by Hunter Douglas, one of the largest the largest window treatment on earth. And 2 months later, COVID hits, and they can't operate literally. So yeah, it's anybody in those sectors, anybody that has a recurring billing model, meaning that they have something that they're trying to service for the company over and over. That's why we work with the creditrepair.coms of the world and the credit.coms and the debt.coms and the Liberty Mutuals and companies like, home security companies, medical alert companies, legal companies.
What's the onboarding look like? Because it seems very culture, dependent on what, it seems like you really dig into kind of how they want the messaging, and how the responses are.
Yeah, the onboarding is very, very nuanced. We have a very senior group of account executives, very, very senior salespeople, sales engineers that really go deep and try to be very thoughtful and prescriptive in what we're doing for these companies, because we're not just helping them get a hold of people to enable the call center. We're helping drive adoption. We're helping reduce churn. We're helping people that got a quote for something that didn't buy right then, helping get them back in the funnel later on, increasing lifetime value, driving to signatures on e-signs. I mean, there's so many places in the funnel where drips can plug in and hold these conversations at these very, very thoughtful moments in time that are critical for the enterprise. And us being an expert in the enterprise businesses themselves is of the utmost importance. This is it's a relatively new channel, and many companies don't know how to leverage it appropriately. Most companies don't. Almost all companies don't, truly.
Early on, did you decide we're going enterprise, or did you experiment with some other niches or size companies?
Early on, we did what any startup should do: is if you had a heartbeat, we would sign you. It didn't matter what you were selling. It could have been watches or markers or timeshares.
Because I see a lot of use cases for this. That's why I ask.
Yeah, no. Early, we went super, super wide, right? We focused on more. We signed anybody and anything, and we learned a ton. And I think that's when you're trying to find product market fit. I think you have to do that. You don't know any better, right? Like you have to like throw it out there, see what works, see what sticks, see what makes sense, figure out how to price it, figure out the problems and the proclivities of different verticals and enterprises. And we've honed it, way down now where we disqualify a lot of the inbound business that we get, not because they couldn't leverage the tool. It's just there's probably better tools or better companies out there for them. If they're small and you're dealing with 12 or 50 leads a day, that's something you can manage on your own. You can enable two-way texting for your agents to hold human conversations. But if you're a large mortgage company or a large education company or a large insurance company, and you're doing thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of leads a day, or you have millions or hundreds of thousands of members a day that you're trying to remind them to pay a bill or whatever it may be, that's a very, very difficult thing to manage at scale. It's cost prohibitive. You run into issues with blocking, at scale, just like you do with email. It's like, you send a couple emails to Gmail, no big deal. You get inbox. Or you try to send 1 million a day, you better have really, really fine-tuned, very, high-end whitelisted ESPs and subscribers and other things of the like. The telco companies are the same. Instead of Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, AOL, it's now T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, etc.
Drips.com, not an easy domain to get to.
Yeah, it was pretty serendipitous. We were coming up with things to call drips at the time. And I found Drips was on Sedo or Sedo, however you say it, sedo.com, one of the big domain parking sites. And it was listed for like $80,000 or something. It was, way, 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 way out of our budget. But I looked in the Whois registry and figured out who owned it and what they had up before. And it was some investment site I didn't really understand it. But anyway, I reached out to the guy, found his Hotmail address, and I said, hey, look, it's me and my buddy. And I'm emailing him from a Gmail, and, just a young startup and couple fellas trying to build this cool technology for, drip campaign enablement across two-way texting, which had never been done before. That was always an email thing, and we wanted to shorten it and call it drips to give it our own name and our own nomenclature and get some notoriety around that as a brand. And he loved it. He was like, that's great. I'm an entrepreneur, blah, blah, blah. Are you guys he asked if we were in investment software. And I said, no, why? And he said, well, drips is dividend reinvestment.
It's some acronym.
Something systems, right? Yeah, some acronym. I'm like, no. So we had no idea what each other did, which meant neither of us I didn't value his .com the way that I could have or should have, and nor did he value what we were doing. So he ended up selling it to us. I'm proud to say for I think it was $3,000.
Wow, nice work.
Yeah, thank you.
And you say you're bad at negotiation. You're good.
Yeah, that was probably like the only one that went well, where I got a good deal. But
that's amazing.
That was huge. Like I try to tell entrepreneurs now, and I coach a handful of them, that brand is so important. Like when you have a .com, and like we spent good money and got a good logo, and
that's street cred. I mean, that 5-letter domain.
You got it. Even on day one, we had street cred. Even with no clients, we had what looked like authority. With very little, we had a lot out of the gate. So when 3-Day Blinds looked at it, it wasn't drip-systems.net. It was drips.com. And that brings a level of authority with it that I think a lot of people underestimate these days. Yeah. With the .nets and the .biz and the .ios and things like that.
2 last questions, AC. First of all, appreciate you sharing your journey and experience. Super valuable. Everyone should check out drips.com and check out everything they're doing. And if you know someone that he mentioned that should be using it, tell them check out drips.com, because it's a scalable solution and humanized also, which is pretty cool. And I always ask, since Inspired Insider, what's been a challenge moment, low moment in the journey, the business, and on the flip side, what's been a proud moment also? What's been a kind of a challenge moment, as you talked about? I mean, it's always a windy road. What's been a challenge moment, low moment for the company?
I think in the beginning, for me personally, the struggle was trying to build without running out of money. Like we're Midwesterners, my first thought while we were building this company was not, we should raise some money and, deploy it and hire a team and, go against a burn. Tony and I had other businesses that were making money, and we wanted to build something lasting and something scalable.
You bootstrapped it.
Yeah, we bootstrapped it. So we put in, a lot of money of our own, but it was a finite amount. We didn't have millions of dollars to deploy, so we deployed the little we had, and then it was a race against making money. Like I remember back in the day, we were making in a month what we are by noon now. On a Tuesday, and I remember thinking like, if we just get to this next level, and Tony and I pushed ourselves to the brink. I mean, I got to the point where I had to get medicated. I had audible hallucinations, which is a terribly trippy thing if you've never experienced it. But we would work so hard and run into the red so long for so many days in a row that I would try to go to sleep, and I could literally hear my partner Tony's voice in my head saying random words. And this was a cause of just stressing out too much and never getting real rest and just being in the red for too long. And once that happened, I realized I had to prioritize my sleep a little bit better and prioritize.
I just got the Aura ring the other few days ago.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and since then, now I'm a big proponent of meditation and saunas and cold showers and steam rooms and all this other crap to
prioritize your health.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. But yeah, in the beginning, I had to kill myself because we were running out. You know what I mean? There was a finite moment. It wasn't next week, it wasn't next month, but it was coming. And the more I worked, the further I could push that date out. So that's hard, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize that. I sometimes, I follow a handful of people or friends of mine that are starting their own stuff online, and I see all the time they're talking about, the game or the last series of whatever, Game of Thrones or whatever. And I know these people are building. I know they're running out of money, and I'm watching and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, how do you have the time to follow sports? Like, it's not for everybody, right? Like punishing yourself and pushing yourself as hard as we did absolutely isn't for everybody. But I know very few companies that bootstrapped to the level that we've gotten to that didn't have that type of upbringing, where they just ran as hard as they possibly could. So, I've had plenty of personal struggles with that. My wife, having to ride that roller coaster with me, has had personal struggles. So that's probably one of my most down moments, was just just getting through that, candidly. Yeah. And then, but on the other side of it, now we have a very strong senior leadership team. I'm very emboldened and empowered by them. And I got people now that are doing stuff much better than I ever could. And they every new one of those, men and women on the leadership page and the other managers and other employees, like, they take a huge lift off of our shoulders. And now I can focus on the things I want to focus on. I don't have to just, kill myself to get that next deal or to, get that next case study or write that next level of code or whatever it is. Everybody is pushing in the same direction, and I'm, still right there with them, but I'm able to do what I'm uniquely capable of doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Totally appreciate it. Everyone check out drips.com. AC, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. Bye, everybody.